Tengo solo 3 panelistas. Por eso, incluyéndome a mí. Amanda, it's 3 panelists and me, right? So we need only 4?
Sorry.
How are you doing?
Are you okay?
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, just, and then I invite Renee.
And then Renee. Okay, yep. Yeah,
So we can take off.
I thought we were 4.
Yeah, I know. Your name. Thank you. Amanda, one thing. We're just invited. This is This is a big lunch tomorrow. Yes. So yeah, because in the event. So they said like if we want to go, we would have to send a notepad so that they put us in the list because it's one of those. It's like the one today.
Do you know what time it's at?
Here. 2 to 3. No?
Well, we have our own launch at the same time. Our launch of the thematic, the working group.
Oh.
Is 1 till 2:30. We could try, but anyways, this is a big to-do on the list. Is linking all of the agriculture and systems things from January. Figuring out how we manage this.
So if anything, you should just reach out to Marshall.
Marshall. Okay. That's who you talk to. Okay.
She's by my side. We're
Okay.
speaking together. Should we start? Oh, yeah, it's 2:04. Okay. Hello. Good afternoon. Is it afternoon? Yes, it's afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this event. I'm Pablo Vieira. I am the Global Director of the NDC Partnership, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's event on behalf of our co-chairs, the governments of the Netherlands and the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD. So this is a very interesting conversation about integrated investment at the water-climate nexus. It is a topic that has been discussed across COP today. I just came running from another event where we were presenting a paper we launched together with IFAD just a few days ago on exactly that. So it's very, very relevant. So we have 2 speakers to open up today's session and to tell us a little bit in detail why this is important. And we also have a fantastic panel with country representatives. Earlier this year, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water concluded that the world will fail on climate and development if it fails on water. As the IPCC 6th report synthesis underscores, climate change impacts on water availability and are projected to significantly increase with every degree of global warming, with 3 to 4 billion people projected to be exposed to physical water scarcity if we exceed 2 degrees Celsius warming. So it's very relevant because the conversation today is connected to what's happening in the negotiation space and what we need to agree on under the global stocktake, because it's not just about the impacts that we'll have in terms of climate, it's how this will spill over in terms of food security, water availability, and usage. So it's extremely important. Putting water at the heart of policy making and economic decision making is extremely important. And NDCs can serve as a critical entry point for integrating water into all relevant climate-related actions. The NDC Partnership, a coalition of over 200 members working to deliver ambitious climate action in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, is supporting member countries in this effort. Through the partnership, our members provide technical assistance to countries to leverage water-climate nexus opportunities. And through events like today's one, we strive to create space for countries to learn from each other on opportunities and challenges to leverage water as an entry point for ambitious climate action. Today, we will dive specifically into the challenges to fund climate action in this area and discuss potential solutions. We'll first hear from two of our partners on recent work they have done with us and then go into a panel conversation. But what's important here is that we're bringing together partners and countries so that we can find ways forward in terms of integrating water, food, climate, so that we can drive more ambitious NDCs in the following years, but also so that we can unlock the finance that is necessary to implement them. And bringing, as we have a nexus approach, we're bringing also social, economic, and climate and environmental benefits. So it's bringing it all together. So it's extremely rewarding to have our two speakers. We have Dr. Joe Puri, who's the Associate Vice President at the International Fund for Agricultural Development of the United Nations. She will set the scene on integrated investment approaches for water and climate. And we also have with us Craig Hanson, who's the Managing Director and Executive Vice President for programs at the World Resources Institute, to present on the benefits of investing in water. These are two organizations that have spent a lot of time, many years, in bringing water and food to COPs. And I think that you should be very proud because you're seeing a lot of space, a lot of relevance for water, for food, for agriculture in COP finally, and as a critical element of climate. But Dr. Joe Puri, I would like to invite you to join me here to give your introductory remarks. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much, Pablo, for having me here. Just at the outset, I do want to say that we really treasure our collaboration and our partnership with the NDC Partnership, as well as with the government of Netherlands. As you remarked as well in your opening, Pablo, we spent a lot of time, the International Fund for Agricultural Development has spent a lot of time thinking about how we can truly think of water, food, climate in a nexus approach, because we know as an IFI, as an international financing institution, as well as a UN agency, and looking at the key stakeholders that we target as a consequence of our lending program, which is approximately $8.5 billion for every replenishment, we know that in rural areas, there is no space for siloed approaches. There is no space for just going in and saying, oh, I'm going to do a water intervention and I'm going to go and do a food intervention. The nexus approach is essentially what has been recognized as the way that we need to go to address the very complex area of rural development. And anything lesser than that is just too little, and anything else than that is just too little. So, in this context, the NDC Partnership and the International Fund for Agricultural Development have also put out a white paper for COP28. And the key things and the white paper essentially looks at the climate, food, water nexus to essentially say that all of our interventions, all of our investments on the ground really have to build on the nexus, and also while using data on the ground. We find that if you use a nexus approach between food and water, then that is able to get you a 5.14% higher return on an investment compared to those investments that just look at food or just look at water. And clearly, so it's a win-win also for investors to come into this space and to be thinking about it in an integrated way. What gets you there? And we think of it in the with the 4 Bs, right? So I call it the building, blending, bankability, and benefit sharing. So those are the 4 Bs. So first is building. You've got to think about bringing together different finance appetites and different investment appetites to truly be building a platform that caters to the different risk appetites, the different impact appetites, and the different return appetites that different investors have in this space, so that you can truly aggregate and accelerate financing. So that's the building part. But the blending part also becomes important, because we know that as we bring in different types of financing, it is important to then think about how we can truly aggregate that in the best synthetic way possible, so that we are delivering for a portfolio of projects that are also bankable on the ground. Bankability. One of the key concerns in this space has been, and we've witnessed it ourselves personally and professionally, is that when we bring in private sector and or commercial actors into the space, a lot of them feel that there are very few bankable projects, projects that have converted the intentions of an NDC or the intentions of an app into something that is investable, into something that is showing all three aspects of what is required of an investment, which is risk, return, and impact. And really having that bankability and a pipeline of projects is essentially what we're also very proud of, because we've got, for example, a portfolio of projects that we will be committing to next year for approximately $1.7 billion in Africa and in Asia predominantly. Most of them look at the nexus and take on the nexus of food, water, and climate in all of the interventions that are designed within these investments. The last part is benefit sharing. I think the benefit sharing part is probably the most important and the most critical, because in our own work we've recognized that smallholder farmers, people who are working in rural areas, are the ones that mostly invest in the kind of nexus approaches that we're all interested in. They are the ones who take on nature-based solutions. They are the ones who essentially invest in agrobiodiversity, in agroecology, in agroforestry. But they are not really the focus of our incentive mechanisms when we start to build those, right? So when we build incentives for investing in these spaces, we are only looking at private investors that are commercial and large scale. But we never think about benefit sharing. How can the returns that come from these investments really go back to the farmers, to the small-scale producers that are clearly investing in these approaches right from the beginning of time? And so that benefit sharing part of the entire proposition becomes really critical for us, and it's something that we're collaborating not just with the NDC Partnership, but also with the Ministry of International Cooperation of Egypt, as well as Citigroup and many other investors in this space. The last thing that I want to talk about in the context of the white paper is that we also lay out 4 investment pathways. This is a transition finance pathway, this is a patient capital pathway, and then this is a finance pathway for investing in nature. The transition capital pathway is essentially looking at regenerative food and agriculture. The patient capital is essentially looking at landscape approaches for financing. And the natural capital finance pathway is essentially saying that we need to incentivize nature-based solutions even as we go out and take on this nexus approach in a head-on way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe, and we really appreciate the collaboration that we're having. We're very happy to have you here every day, basically, sometimes multiple times a day. It's really, really nice. And of course, now it's my pleasure to invite Craig to come and share some of the insights that WRI has been working for years in terms of why this makes sense. Craig.
Thank you, Pablo, and thank you for the invitation. Go ahead and put the PowerPoint. Great, fantastic, thank you. We're here today to talk about basically the nexus of adaptation, of finance, and water. And I put up here the question here, or the statement effectively, that there is underinvestment in water when it comes to adaptation. I mean, I think we all would agree on that one. And what I'm going to propose is a reason why that's the case, and then a potential solution for how we actually can address that. So let's do it the right way. Here we go. So as we all know, climate risks are what we call macro-critical risks. These are things that actually hit nation states at all the macroeconomic indicators: GDP, fiscal stability, debt sustainability, trade, right? Financial sector stability and instability, as well as migration, right? So these are mega impacts here that countries, finance ministers in particular, should be concerned about. It's also the case that water is to adaptation as energy is to mitigation. Let's think about that for a second. We're always thinking about energy as got to solve the energy issue to deal with mitigation. I would argue you have to solve the water challenge if you're going to deal with adaptation. Water, there's too little of it through droughts, too much of it with rising seas, flooding, or strong storms. Or as I like to say, if climate change is a shark, water is its teeth, right? That's how we actually feel it. Now, the challenge though is, if you go to a finance minister and talk to him or her about water, more often than not, their eyes will glaze over, they don't see it. Water is proverbially the thing that slips through all the cracks, right? Because it crosses so many ministries, etc. We need to find a way to speak to finance ministers at the water adaptation nexus in a manner that hits those macro indices, those macro impacts that I showed you on the first slide, because that's what finance ministers are thinking about: GDP, job security, economic security, trade. So how do we actually do that? So we just finished a working paper here, WRI, on behalf of the NDC Partnership, building off of some research the past couple of years that WRI has been doing along with the World Bank on this concept of the triple dividend. How many people in the room actually have heard of this? The triple dividend. Okay, you've read the paper. That doesn't count. And you've read the paper too, right? So most of you don't know what this is. And actually, I found this really fascinating. So here's what it essentially is. Look at the maroon, avoided losses. That's what most entities, even finance ministries, calculate when they're thinking about climate change and its impact. And they're thinking about, do I make an investment in some type of adaptation intervention, especially in this case on water? Do I make that investment or not? Well, they'll say, well, it's going to cost me to do it. But then what are my avoided losses? If the extreme event, the storm surge comes, and I have this massive flooding, what would the damage be? But then I have to discount that too, given the probability of whether or not that's going to occur, right? And that combination of the cost of the intervention, the avoided impact, and the probability of that impact, right, oftentimes ends up with something that might not look all that in terms of a cost-benefit analysis, all that attractive, because they're saying, well, low probability, high impact. I'll take my bet on the low probability in a world where my national finances are kind of constrained. What the triple dividend says is you're only looking at one potential benefit of making that investment in water adaptation. There are two other benefits, or we call dividends, that most often are overlooked but should be factored into the calculation. The second dividend is called the induced economic benefits. And what that means is that if you make an investment that is an adaptation measure on water, like you build a flood wall, you restore some mangroves, you make a sponge park in the city so it deals with overflows, you shift to drip irrigation, right, in your agriculture system. Actually, there are induced economic benefits from doing that. So in this case, even in London, when they built the Thames barrier to deal with flooding, actually the property values actually increased. You had development in Canary Wharf. The government actually made money on the tax revenues. You had private sector investment, private sector revenues from all the greater security of the land around that you induced a huge economic boom. Or you think of drip irrigation, which not only is an adaptation measure, it actually can increase yields because it's consistent, greater efficiency use of the water, et cetera, cost savings to the farmer, right? So those are the private economic benefits that occurred. And finally, the third dividend is the social and environmental benefits. You restore that mangrove. That mangrove is great for biodiversity. It's great for carbon, right? That's the third dividend. And even here it says you support local fisheries and even some type of forestry. Well, that's actually the second dividend. That's also an induced economic benefit. The point here is traditional economic valuation and financial evaluation only looks at the maroon, the first dividend, and does not factor in the next two dividends. And that changes the game. And it's really important to note what the so whats of this are. First, the second and third dividends, the blue and the orange, you will get that. The investor will get those returns whether or not the climate event actually occurs. So it's not there's no probability there. You will get that, right? Which actually starts to shift the economic calculus. The total benefits of adaptations don't rely on the probabilities of the actual event to occur, right? And oftentimes, and I'll show you some data points here, the second and third dividends often are larger than the first dividend. So it really makes the case for you in terms of it. And finally, and this is important for financing, not all the benefits are just public benefits. The induced economic benefits oftentimes provide private benefits, which opens the door for blended finance, because there are private entities that will actually get some economic benefit. Therefore, they should be ones that actually help start to invest in the adaptation measure itself. And here's just a study that we pulled from the literature. You just see all the ones in the circle are water-related investments, whether it is in Ningxia, China, that is massive drip irrigation, where basically the second dividend to the farmers is huge. The middle ones in Australia and China, those are dealing with urban flooding in China is a restoration of wetlands and water areas within an urban area to actually serve as a sponge, right? Look at the size of the third dividend, but which is dwarfs, right, the first dividend. Most financial analyses, most numbers that make it to the finance minister's desk only look at the maroon. But look, if we include the blue, the second dividend, the orange, and the third dividend, look at how it actually changes the calculations. And our point is that we're basically missing this, right? And this could be a game changer in our view of driving investment in water adaptive measures, right, in NDCs, in government policies, and government financing, because the water-related impacts are macro-critical. Finance ministers do and should care about them. They affect GDP, economic development, et cetera. Investing in water adaptation solutions reduces those risks. And if you recognize all three dividends, you will actually see the numbers actually add up, and it makes for a good investment. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Craig. And once again, these two presentations have shown you the incredible value of taking this nexus approach. And we very much appreciate the collaboration with WRI and with IFAD and the Netherlands for making it happen in many senses with their leadership around water. So it's great. And this has set the scene for a conversation now where we will focus on countries. So I would like to invite to join me here our three distinguished panelists. First, Ms. Eleanor Jones, Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer for the Environmental Solutions Limited and a representative from a Jamaican delegation. Please, thank you. Then Dr. Abdullahi Khalif, the NDC Country Facilitator for Somalia. Please join us. And Dr. Azamat Temirkulov, Director of the Climate Finance Center in the Ministry of Natural Resource, Ecology and Technical Supervision in the Kyrgyz Republic. So we have three member countries of the partnership, three different types of countries, different realities, but for all of them, this is a very, very relevant topic. So I'm going to start with you, Ms. Jones. How is water relevant to Jamaica's climate action? And is enough finance flowing to water climate projects? And if yes or not, why or why not? I think it's very important. And we've heard from Minister Samura repeatedly the importance of this nexus and how they want to really step up the work over the next year in bringing this investments to the water, climate, agriculture, food nexus. So please, Ms. Jones.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to share with my colleagues and to listen to what you all had to say. I'm intrigued by the triple dividend approach, kind of like a triple bottom line, looking at things in a different way. And as an environmental practitioner and one with a great interest in water, drainage basin, functioning of water, this is a pleasure to be here. Jamaica is small island developing states. Most people know that, although some of us call the small island states now large ocean states. I'm sure you've probably heard of that. We have more water around us than we have on, and we have resources there as well. And in the early days, Jamaica was called land of wood and water. And the reason is, early days, I mean really, really early days, when the West moved into the native, because of forest cover and because of the tremendous amount of water that was there. What has happened over the years, and let's just jump forward, is that we have had population growth. We have, of course, the rural-urban mix, like you have in most places. Population growth that has resulted, or that is increasing now, urbanization, which is putting a whole different spin on what we do with water and the demand for water. And it's interesting that you referred to Minister Samuda talking, because water is a critical issue. It's been a political issue, particularly in the rural areas where politicians make promises for water because there is that demand. Very often those promises are not realized until the next election. The same promises are made. The fact is that the demand is growing, and Jamaica has had a bimodal pattern of rainfall. And what we have seen is also declining rainfall, or maybe not even declining rainfall as much as unpredictability, longer periods of drought, and when you expect the rain, you're not getting the rain. And then because of urbanization and because of changing settlement patterns, you're getting more runoff, so you're getting flashy flows in your rivers, so you're not getting that sustainable supply. And our biggest reservoir is our groundwater aquifers. We're a limestone-based country, and most of our water resources are in the ground. So water is critical to us. We're not a water deficit country, but where the resources are is not where the people reside. And so there is that issue, critical issue for us. So what is important is for us to look at, face the reality in terms of the climate data. Our climate scientists are telling us that there is going to be increasing drying, especially in areas where we get the most rain. So we're going to be getting perhaps less water, therefore we have to manage more. We are urbanizing and we are doing development, regrettably without, in many instances, the kind of planning that is necessary, the development planning. So you put in a housing development, or you put in a resort, and then you expect the water to follow somehow. And so the whole business of managing, efficient management for sustainable quality water, where our people live, our watersheds are important. Where you have people living in the rural areas, you're degrading the watersheds. So you're contributing to challenges with the sustainability of the supply, and you are increasing the demand and working with climate, the reality of climate. And here now we're talking about, as we talk about water for agriculture, we talk about water for drinking, you know, your residential, your agricultural use. And I was happy to hear the business of excess rainfall, flooding, storm surge, because our consideration for water has to include all of that.
Thank you very much. And yes, what you're seeing in the variation of rainfall, for example, Minister Zamora was telling me actually that you've been seeing lately months where you get less than 10% of regular rainfall, and then that's followed by months where you get 2 or 3 times the amount, and that brings a lot of issues because the ground is not able to recover. You go through droughts, and then water just washes everything out. So thank you for that, and for your example in terms of the reality. Let me move on to Dr. Khalif. What do you see as the most urgent need in Somalia to adopt water management approaches? What is an example of a positive investment in the water climate nexus in Somalia that others can learn from?
Thank you very much, Pablo, and thank you for my neighbor, Elena, from Jamaica. It reminds me exactly how Somalia is being the longest, having the longest coastal line in continental Africa, and having 2 rivers. Some places those rivers can be called like streams because they are very small, but they are 2 rivers, one seasonal, one not seasonal. So when you look at the availability of water in Somalia, is actually exactly as Elena said, too much and too little. As we speak today, the current El Nino, Somalia is actually even run over the whole towns. And you can see a town which has been submerged completely by water. Going back 6 seasons before this El Nino, there was severe drought and people did not have any water for livestock or for pastoral drinking water. So it shows the imbalances of the country's water really when it comes into fresh water, for drinking or for livestock or for a cultivation. Rivers dried and the livestock did not have that. So how do we see the Somalia government really to do? We have already worked on an integrated water resource management. And in our NDC, which we have already launched 4 days ago in this pavilion, when I am looking at, for example, our adaptation proposal and the adaptation intervention, when I looked about those bar charts, water investment, requirement of water investment is actually the highest compared to 9 other sectors. That shows how water is important in Somalia and what our plan is to be. We are actually currently working in our NDC as the Netherlands said, for example, the possible bankable water project that the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water Resources and Energy, Ministry of Planning are actually coming together with the development partners and our NDC partnership, all thinking like our priority should be the water. And it is really in Somalia, it is a very serious case because like the current El Nino, it washed away all the animals, let me say towns, crops, and even created the land gullies and seasonal, the damage to the entire topographic system of the land. So that shows you we have to do things differently on what we are doing today. And that is why this strategy of integrated water management and the NDC implementation plan is actually focusing on, and we have to realize doing that. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much. And again, bringing the reality of the country and then how you can use tools like the NDCs and its implementation plan to drive a transformation that will allow you to deal with those realities that are at this point inevitable and will probably get even worse. So thank you for that. Let me move on then to Dr. Termikulov. And of course you come from the Climate Finance Center at the Ministry of Natural Resources, Ecology and Technical Supervision. So you're dealing with the issue of climate finance every day. So what is the role of water in climate action in the Kyrgyz Republic, and what is needed to increase the flow of climate finance for the water nexus solutions in your country, but also around the world? What are your experiences, and what are you seeing as viable options to mobilize finance at scale?
Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to your audience. Yes, of course, for the Kyrgyz Republic, the water climate nexus is extremely important because Kyrgyz Republic is a mountainous country which has glaciers. 95% of our territory are mountains, and half of the whole Central Asian region receives water from the glaciers of the Kyrgyz Republic. So up to 50 billion cubic meters of water are formed on the territory of the Kyrgyz Republic yearly. Yeah? So it's quite a big amount of water, and this water goes down to other countries like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, which are also dependent on our water resources. So when I'm talking about water in Kyrgyzstan, I'm also talking about water climate nexus in the region, in neighboring Kazakhstan, in neighboring Turkmenistan. But what is also interesting that, in fact, glaciers are important not only for the region, but for the whole world. Because my colleagues here were saying about the sea level rising, which is another problem, probably on the other continent. But where is the cause? Why the ocean is growing? Why the sea level is rising? And the causes are in the mountains, one of the causes, of course. This is not the only part of the cryosphere. There are, of course, other glaciers, but one huge part of the cryosphere is situated in the mountains, in the glaciers, and glaciers are melting. Kyrgyzstan, for example, lost, during the last 50 years, we lost up to 30% of our glaciers. And all this water is going down to the ocean, increasing the sea level. Yeah? So our scientists esteem that by the end of this century, Kyrgyzstan risks to lose up to 80% of its glaciers. And this is not something which will happen. It's going on already. It's a fact of the current day. Of course, it has a strong impact not only on environment, but it has a strong impact on energy sector. Because, for example, in Kyrgyzstan, 95% of all energy are produced by hydroelectricity stations. We are dependent on water energy. And because of the water is decreasing, today we have deficit of energy resources. Yearly, we have 3 billion kilowatt per hours deficit. We produce 14 billion and we consume 17 billion. So 3 billion we have to import from neighboring Kazakhstan or even Russia and Turkmenistan. If the water will continue, the level of the water in the river will continue to go down, then of course we face troubles with the energy sector. And again, it's already happening. Yeah? So this year was announced by the president as the year of emergency in energy sector. Yeah? We risk to have very cold winter without energy for heating some parts of the capital. So this is a huge problem. Another thing is that the most important economic sector in Kyrgyzstan is agriculture. 66% of the population are busy in agriculture. And of course, for agriculture, we need water. Starting from the Soviet period, we use water by channels which are not concrete. So that means that simply earth channels, and there are a lot of water loses, water goes down to the earth. So it is very irrational use of water. So because of this loss of water, we have to use more and more water to irrigate our fields. Yeah? And the amount of water is not enough then for those who are on the downstream of the river. Yeah? So the decreasing of the water now is harming also agriculture. So I saw now these two presentations very correctly pointing out on this nexus of water, energy, and food security problem. So today we have this food security problem because of the shortage of water. Our farmers, they have less and less products. But moreover, the problem are not finished here because all these risks to lead to the crisis of stability. We already have transboundary water conflicts in Central Asia between neighboring countries like Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. These are local water conflicts. Sometimes they are very violent, sometimes less, but they're already here. Yeah? And again, if the glaciers, will continue to melt, then these problems will be more acute. And if it will harm the agriculture, then people will need more water in neighboring countries and on the transboundary level, they might get to violent water conflicts. So this is the situation. The prognoses are not very good. What can we do? So first of all, the Kyrgyz Republic in the energy sector should develop other energy sources, not rely only on hydroelectricity, but to develop sun, wind electric powers, pump heatings, and that's what we're doing. Another thing is that we have to make our irrigation infrastructure more sustainable. We have to intervene drip irrigation, and we have to make channels concrete, yeah, to limit it, the loss of the water. So that is the focus of the government. That's what we should do. But again, well, there is a shortage of finance in the budget. It's difficult to finance all this by the state budget. We have help from international community, from multilateral banks that help us to work on these two issues, especially on agriculture and on energy. We try to bring some private investments, and private investors are interested in building plants, especially small hydro plants. Also, we have some initiated business on wind and solar energy. But for agriculture, it's difficult to bring private investors. It's because, well, there are so many difficulties on the ground, and big investors are not interested to come to the country and to invest in the agricultural sector. So that's why agricultural sector are basically helped by multilateral banks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's fascinating, and the way you tell this story, it's incredible, because we're seeing not only the link between water and potential food security issues and energy security issues, but also the transboundary impact. No, the fact that you hold the water for the whole region is incredible, and this is something that happens in other regions also, and that's why it's so important to work on these things in a collaborative way, because the issues in agriculture may be small enough so not to bring the private sector, but if you bring in the whole region, maybe there's opportunities to have economies of scale and change things. But again, I think that we heard from the three of you the challenges of mobilizing finance, especially from the private sector, for the solutions that are needed urgently to tackle this crisis, and how things will get worse before they get better, and the solutions are not there in the table. So this is why what we wanted to do by framing this conversation is there's innovative solutions that are out there, and through the NDC Partnership and with the support of the Netherlands, we want to work with you closely to find what are those potential solutions, and then we can see how we can work together in developing plans and strategies and projects so that you can mobilize the finance from the right sources and transform the sectors, understanding what's happening. So the benefits are in adaptation in many senses, mitigation even in many senses, especially around energy and agriculture sector, but it's also about the well-being of the people, the social and economic challenges that countries are facing. So I really appreciate your presentations. Maybe if there's any questions, I will open the floor for a couple of minutes before we have the closing. So let me ask if anyone wants to hear from our presenters, from our panelists. Okay, René. Oh, there you go.
I would just have a question to Greg, because Greg, you had such a compelling presentation on the triple dividend. And now listening to the lady and the two gentlemen in these cases, how would that inspire you to, I mean, I wouldn't say even work harder on the triple dividend case, because that's obviously what you do, but how would that sort of trade into the important work that the World Resources Institute is doing no matter what? And where do you think that we, as a coalition of countries and organizations that really want to push this boundary, where would you see some opportunities?
So thanks for the question. I think a couple of things. Thinking of the NDC partnership, right? As we know, finance is the #1 request that the NDC partnership gets from countries, right? So I could imagine that one thing that can happen is, as the NDC partnership actually engages these countries, that helping them think through, the types of investments and thinking through all 3 dividends, basically applying the triple dividend approach, which now the World Bank is starting to do as well, right? Apply that type of approach as the countries think through the types of adaptive measures they're going to be thinking about. So it's kind of, I mean, it's quite intuitive, right? Once you say it, right, they say, oh yeah, of course. But it's funny how like 5 years ago, people really weren't talking about it at all, right? And you focus really on what it costs. So I think it's about the NDC partnership could work with some of its technical assistance partners to support countries in actually applying that, so that then the case can be made to the finance ministries, the place where the money is, to then better understand and more fully appreciate the positive returns on certain investments. In this case, in terms of the water climate nexus.
Thank you, Craig and Renee. And I think that you bring something that is fundamental, and it's some of the most important outcomes for the partnership in this COP. On the one side, we've been having conversations between IFAD, the Netherlands, and the NDC Partnership about how to support countries advance the mobilization of finance from the private sector in this water, climate, food nexus. Now, how can we support them in advance by developing projects that are bankable, that really catch the eye of the investors? On the other hand, we launched alongside the GCF an investment planning guide that, again, gives that full comprehensive view of how to mobilize investments for these difficult areas. No, you need to look at your policies, your legal framework. You need to think about the different sources of finance. You need to look at the dividends and how to sell it to the private sector through innovative approaches. And then you need to develop projects that will meet those criteria and mobilize the finance. And we launched a joint initiative with the Coalition of Finance Ministers, again, to support ministries of finance get more involved in the development and implementation of NDC. So these 3 points that you put on the table, Craig, are the kinds of things that we're trying to do to really bring together the whole ecosystem of relevant stakeholders. So that's really, really great. So to close, I have the honor of turning the floor to René van Heel. He's the Ambassador of Sustainable Development, and in many senses the Ambassador of the NDC Partnership at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is contributing financial support to the NDC Partnership in the amount of 5 million euros, in addition to their very, very generous core funding to the support unit, to support countries to mitigate the impacts of climate change, reduce water-related climate vulnerability, and increase public and private investment targeting the water nexus opportunities. Through its technical assistance, the NDC Partnership is facilitating support for countries to integrate water into their NDCs. So, René, welcome. Again, you also spent a lot of time in this pavilion. We're very happy to see you here again, and you feel at home. So that's the idea. This is your pavilion. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you may all feel that feeling like after spending a week or longer here at the COP, you sort of look for your little home, and this is one of my homes. No, thank you so much. I think that the importance of what we're discussing here this afternoon between 2 and 3 is also exemplified just by the meeting that I had prior to joining you here. And we had a meeting with ministers or their DEPs from China, the United States, the Dominican Republic, Namibia, Singapore, the UK, the Netherlands, and some others that I should have paid credit to. But I just mentioned these countries because we were discussing what happened after the UN Water Conference, what did we chairs and co-chairs do, and where is the future, and where do we need to go to? And it was all about this. So literally we were talking about the problems in Somalia. Literally we were mentioning the challenges of small island states. And Dominican Republic didn't only speak about itself, but also about you. And literally we also talked about the challenges on security and sustainability when you have to deal with melting glaciers and many more of these issues. And what was also very important in this meeting was that there was an incredible sense of urgency. And I like to mention that there was China and there was the United States, and that is helpful. So they're impatient with the pace of what we're doing, and there is, let's say, also this the need to speed up what we do in the World Bank, the need to speed up in other MDBs, but also the need to speed up whatever unites us in the UN, but also as bilateral donors. Was consensus, and it's nice when nowadays when you meet sometimes with international friends, there's not always so much consensus. So this was really good, and as Greg mentioned, it is about this triple dividend, but it's also finding the magic potion in your own country, in your own local situation, and oftentimes a little bit of tweaking the rules or making them smarter or making them a little bit less heavy is helpful. And that is also why I'm an enthusiastic partner in the NDC Partnership, because we also sometimes can bring this knowledge and can bring these insights. And I also wanted to say is that working in a rich country, having all the resources, it is sometimes really difficult to get a grip on all the things that are out there. And I think one of the tools that we have here at our hand is the NDC Partnership, to get a better grip of what is out there, how can you help, what aids us in our technical assistance that we want to give to each other in order to truly partner on an equal footing. So thank you very much for sharing your insights. Thank you very much for the audience to pay attention. And just rest assured, this is a very important topic. It's not going away. On the contrary, we need to work harder on it. Thank you for your attention.
And with that, I want also to thank our panelists. So I invite everyone to give them a warm round of applause, because they shared what is happening and the potential solutions. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.